What's up everybody on YouTube, AJ Rose back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be talking about what happened and what we learned from NFL Week 6. Like I've said in these previous weekly recaps, we're starting to get into the area where we have a good perception of how teams are in this season, some of the contenders, some of the people who are going to be itching and fighting and clawing for the playoffs, and some of the teams who are going to be tanking and trying to get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. Hopefully your favorite team isn't trying to tank, but if they are, I'm sorry. But anyways though, before we get into the video, make sure you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe and turn on post notifications. I post videos about sports, lifestyle, and pop culture. So with that being said, let's get right into it. So guys, we can quickly talk about the Thursday night football game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos. If we're being honest, no one expected the Broncos to win this game. They've been really having a rough year this season, and honestly, Russell Wilson hadn't been playing bad, but in this game, he definitely played bad. He only threw for 95 yards in the game, had 2 picks, but that Denver Broncos defense, which hasn't looked that good at all this year, absolutely awful. In fact, they looked solid against the Chiefs. The Chiefs were only able to score 19 points. Patrick Mahomes threw for 306 passing yards, but only had 1 touchdown and had an interception as well. And I think that we have to have a conversation about Eric Bieniemy's impact on this offense. And of course, now he's in Washington, and we'll talk about them later. But there's definitely a little drop-off with now Matt Nagy calling plays. Travis Kelce, who I also have in fantasy, played probably his best game of the season so far. Even though he didn't have a touchdown, he had 9 receptions for 124 receiving yards. So that's good for him getting his rhythm in. I'm not going to talk about the other conversation behind Travis Kelce because there's been enough media hype about that. But the Chiefs, they do have some questions for sure, but they did what we all expected them to do and win the game against the Broncos. For a third week in a row, there was a global game in Germany. The last 2 were in London, of course, but this matchup in Germany was between the Baltimore Ravens and the Tennessee Titans, and the Ravens won this game 24-16. Lamar Jackson had an overall great game, I would say. Had 62 yards rushing, but also had 223 yards passing, a touchdown and an interception. The Ravens, I feel like they're going to be, of course, in the mix for the playoffs in the AFC. We'll see if the Bengals in their same division are able to get back to their rhythm as we expected, which they look like they're trending towards to. Only time will tell with that. The Ravens, they still have a great chance to win the AFC North and be competitive. Of course, you have the Browns in that division as well, who played really impressive defense against the 49ers, which we'll talk about next. But yeah, and on the Titans end, Ryan Tannehill ended up getting injured. Only had 76 yards and had an interception, and they brought in Malik Willis instead of Will Levis. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. I do feel like that Will Levis will ultimately take the reins of the starting quarterback position in Tennessee. Let's talk about the other team in the AFC North, and the Cleveland Browns. Their defense had an excellent showing on Sunday against the 49ers, winning 19-17. And I would say this was for sure Brock Purdy's first pedestrian performance in the NFL. His first full loss in the NFL, playing a full game. And of course, like I said last week, he had been playing good football, even potential on the MVP level. But I never said that he was elite. Of course, you have to look at the system that the 49ers run, all the pieces that he has around him, and Deebo Samuel, who has a shoulder injury, so we don't know how serious that is. And also with Christian McCaffrey, he had an oblique injury, so they're starting to get some of the injury bug. And that's what happens throughout the year. It's not about just how talented you are throughout the season. And of course, the 49ers, they dominated the Cowboys and have dominated really everyone they played up until playing the Browns when they lost the game. But it's about your attrition and how you can stay healthy. That's a big component of these teams that will end up winning the Super Bowl. It's not only the best team, but the team that's the most durable. So we'll see with the 49ers for sure. Talking about the Browns, they're just really impressive, man. Cleveland's defensive coordinator, Jim Schwartz, he really has his guys balling on the defensive end. Of course, you have Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, a lot of different playmakers on that end. And they're going to continue to get better for sure. We all know Deshaun Watson missed his 2nd straight game in this game, but PJ Walker, even though he did throw 2 interceptions, he was able to be a solid game manager, I would say. And Amari Cooper, he had 108 receiving yards, so of course we know he has that big playability in Cleveland, so that's definitely a good win for them. Let's fly through a couple games real quick. The Miami Dolphins dominated the Carolina Panthers 42-21. The Dolphins are now 5-1, and the Carolina Panthers are the only winless team in the league now, being 0-6. Just a lot of questions there. I think that Frank Wright, he's no longer calling the plays now, so that was a different adjustment for them. But like I say about these quarterbacks and people in the league, not only in the NFL, but also in the NBA, you have to give these rookies time. And I don't want to hear no talk about Bryce Young being a bust right now. If you look at Carolina, their team is severely limited and they just don't have the guys. So obviously he went into a team that was bad for a reason, had a top 10 pick for a reason. Of course, they traded with the Bears, but still, they were still the 9th pick and they were bad for a reason. Have a lot of cleaning up to do to surround Bryce Young with some stability. And that's ultimately what plays a factor in quarterbacks being great for sure. About the 2nd pick in CJ Stroud, how he's been playing in Houston, of course. He's been playing great individually, showing poise, never being too high or too low, but also you have to look at their offensive coordinator in Houston as well. He came from the 49ers with DeMeco Ryans, being able to make the right play calls, put CJ in great positions to do so, and that all plays a factor for sure. But beyond that, I think that Bryce Young will be fine, just going to take some maturation. The Dolphins, they're showing to be the most electric offense in the NFL still. Tua Tagovailoa threw for for 262 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert had a great game, 17 carries, 115 rushing yards, 2 tutties as well. Tyreek Hill, he was flipping all over the place after scoring a touchdown, had 6 receptions for 163 receiving yards and a touchdown. I think he already has around 800 receiving yards. He's for sure going to try to break that 2,000 yard receiving record. That would be incredible and insane, and if anyone's capable of doing it, it's for sure Tyreek Hill. Speaking of CJ Stroud, we can talk about the Texans, how they were able to grind out a win against the New Orleans Saints, winning 20-13. CJ finally threw his first interception, but ironically enough, on that same possession, the defender who caught the interception fumbled the ball, which gave the Texans back the ball, and CJ Stroud scored a touchdown on that possession. So that's really good for them, honestly. He had 199 passing yards. Wasn't the most efficient game in terms of his completion percentage, but we know that CJ Stroud for sure, I think, is a leading candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year. That Texans defense has been holding things down for them as well. So shout out to the Texans and CJ Stroud. And on the other end with the Saints, Derek Carr, he did have 353 yards, but when they came down to the times to make the plays, like at the end of the game, trying to tie the game up, and just throughout the game trying to score, the Saints were severely limited and struggled a lot for sure. But they're 3-3, and so are the Texans, both 2 500 teams that are going to be tough opponents for any team in the NFL going forward this season. Next game we can talk about is the Washington Commanders and the Atlanta Falcons. The Commanders won 24-16. Both of these teams are now 3-3 at an even 500 record. We got to talk about Atlanta real quick, just because people have been crapping on Desmond Ridder so bad, and honestly, not to say anyone should be getting crapped on, but his performance has been very subpar. Of course, they won against the Texans last week. He arguably had his best game as a pro, and of course, the week before against the Jaguars, he had a bad game. He had 3 interceptions in the game. Like, you can tell that the Falcons are for sure frustrated with his play, some of the receivers and defense and things of that nature. 3 interceptions is crazy. We also had another quarterback that threw 3 interceptions yesterday, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, in Atlanta, it's tough. But you still have Bijan Robinson and playmakers like that. Drake London had a 125 receiving yards. And you have Kyle Pitts, who they have definitely underutilized. But you just have to see, is Desmond Ridder your solution for being a long-time quarterback? I think a lot of people would say no right now, but that's a question that's unanswered right now. And then on the Washington Commanders end, like I said, Eric Bieniemy is able to get a lot out of Sam Howell for sure. Sam Howell had 3 touchdowns, threw for 151 passing yards. Brian Robertson Jr., he had a struggling game. Only had 10 carries for 31 rushing yards, but they were able to grind his game out. The Jaguars handled their business and stood on their business, beating the Indianapolis Colts 37-20. Trevor Lawrence had a pretty good game. Threw for 188 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Suffered a little knee injury, and they do play this upcoming Thursday, so it'll be a question for sure if he plays against the Saints, but only time will tell with that. Travis Etienne Jr. had 55 rushing yards for 2 touchdowns. Christian Kirk had a touchdown as well, but only 49 receiving yards. On the other end, Gardner Minshew, a quarterback, had 3 interceptions as well. There is a lot of quarterbacks with 3 interceptions, like I said. Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ridder on Sunday, and then also Jalen Hurts too, which we'll talk about next in that Eagles and Jets game. But yeah, the Jaguars did what they were supposed to do. For the Colts, it really sucks that Anthony Richardson is going to be out for the rest of the season, most likely, as Jim Irsay said, but the future will be bright with him. The Colts and Shane Steichen, they just need to utilize him correctly, and so he can protect himself, so he can play for many years to come and be the franchise quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. I mentioned the Cincinnati Bengals a little bit earlier. They were able to win against the Seattle Seahawks 17-13, grinded that game out. Joe Burrow only had 185 passing yards and 2 touchdowns and an interception. Jamar Chase had 80 receiving yards after having a stellar game last week, but the Bengals were able to play good. Bengals defense was able to limit Geno Smith to 2 interceptions. He did have 323 passing yards, but he had no touchdowns, so ultimately that had no payoff. Kenneth Walker III had a touchdown as well, but yeah, the Bengals, I think that they're going to continue to get their rhythm back, go on a streak, and be one of the AFC's best again, like we know them to be for the past few years. We can talk about a game real quick that I probably wouldn't have tuned into if I was in the area, but Minnesota Vikings won against the Chicago Bears 19-13. Nothing really too crazy there. The Bears are now 1-5, and Justin Fields, he got hurt in the game, tried to come back after popping his finger back in place, but we'll see how that injury develops. But yeah, Kirk Cousins recently was confirmed by Adam Schefter that he's gonna remain as a Viking. There will be no trade for him potentially to the Jets or any franchise like that, so he'll be a free agent in 2024. Here's another stinker game, and I say that respectfully as possible, but let's be real, that didn't sound respectful. The Patriots lost another game to the Las Vegas Raiders, losing 21-17. Patriots are now 1-5. I've never seen the Patriots like this in my 21 years of life. It's crazy to see them so bad right now, so down and out. There for sure will be reinforcements made and questions like if Bill Belichick should still be the GM and the coach. I feel like he should just be the coach, but that's just my 2 cents in it, and we'll see what Robert Kraft will have to say about that going forward. And then the Raiders, since Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, he played a solid game, but it's like every game he's due to throw an interception. Like, he's leading the league in interceptions right now with 8 interceptions total thrown, but they were still able to win the game, so props to him, I suppose. But yeah, nothing really too crazy about this game. Let's move on. Let's talk real quick about the Detroit Lions. They're for sure the 3rd best team in the NFC right now. I can confidently say that. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 20-6 in convincing fashion. They now have a 5-1 record. Jared Goff has been playing really good this year, man. Completed 30 out of his 44 passing attempts for 353 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm really liking how the Lions are looking. A lot of people projected them to, of course, win the NFC North going into this year with the Packers not having Aaron Rodgers anymore, the question and dysfunction of the Chicago Bears, and then now the Vikings slipping like they have, and now without Justin Jefferson for the next. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, he had a really great game as well. Had 12 receptions, 124 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Have Jamison Williams, who's coming back into the fold. The Detroit Lions, they're getting right for sure, man. Love how Dan Campbell is coaching them up. But talking about the other end of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield, he struggled in this game. He had an interception. Only completed 19 out of his 37 passing attempts for 206 passing yards. But I'm still impressed with how the Buccaneers have been, considering that people thought that they were going to truly suck this year. Anything to take away from this is that the Lions are for real, and that the Buccaneers are still solid. And those creamsicle uniforms, my dad is a Bucs fan. Those are so tough for sure. It sucks that they lost in those uniforms, but at least they look good. The Los Angeles Rams were able to beat the Arizona Cardinals 26-9, moving to a 3-3 record. Cooper Kupp was able to score his first touchdown of the season, had 7 receptions for 148 receiving yards and a touchdown. Shout outs to him. We know when healthy, he's one of the best receivers and most explosive receivers for sure. Having that rapport with Matthew Stafford, who had 226 passing yards and a touchdown. Kyron Williams of the Rams had a really impressive showing, having 158 rushing yards and a touchdown. And on the other end with the Cardinals, I mean, we really don't expect too much for them, but they have impressed people in terms of their hard play, giving teams their best shot. So shout out to the Cardinals for that. But the Rams, I feel like they'll for sure be a playoff contender. Don't think that they'll win the division, of course, being in the same division as the 49ers and potentially battling things out with the Seahawks as well, try and make the playoffs. But the Rams, they're moving in a positive direction. Let's finally talk about that Eagles and Jets game, guys. I watched that game pretty much fully for the most part. It was a really entertaining matchup, not in terms of points being scored, but defensive display by the New York Jets and even the Eagles too. But the Jets for sure, they turned over Jalen Hurts 4 times, I believe, 4 times in total that the Eagles had turnovers, and he had 3 interceptions himself. Had a chance at the end of the game to go win it and wasn't able to. And that gave the Eagles their first loss of the season, so they're gonna have to reevaluate a lot of things. I think it's the first pedestrian performance I've seen of Jalen Hurts since 2021. In his first full year of starting, that's when I was like, man, he's gonna have to develop for real. And then last year, it really just blinded a lot of people from those struggles that he had in 2021. He had a great year, MVP level year last year, even though he didn't win the award. But he's been struggling to get things going this year, of course, with a new offensive coordinator. Jalen Hurts has 7 interceptions on the season himself, so there'll be a lot to reevaluate for the Eagles. It's positive for them that they're 5-1. In terms of the New York Jets, hey, props to them, man. I for sure think if they had Aaron Rodgers, it's safe to say that they could potentially be like 5-1 right now. They would for sure be Super Bowl candidates. And shout out to Zach Wilson. He didn't throw a touchdown, but he also didn't turn over the ball. He's been playing really good and solid since that Kansas City Chiefs game, so I'm impressed with him and how he's continuing to get better. So shout out to Zach Wilson. Shout out to the Jets team in general. Robert Saleh, Daniel Hackett getting the offense solid and everything right, and they for sure can make the playoffs still. I firmly believe that. Sunday Night Football was really an unimpressive game between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Giants. The Giants were up 6-0 at halftime, and they honestly could have scored more if they were able to manage the clock better going into halftime. Ended up losing the game on a controversial call at the end. Darren Waller had an opportunity to catch a touchdown, and some people thought it was pass interference. It definitely looked like it, but who am I to judge or say? The Bills were able to win this game. It was definitely an ugly win, one that they needed after losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the week prior. Josh Allen had 169 passing yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Tyrod Taylor, of course, who played in service of Daniel Jones, had 200 passing yards. Didn't play bad, didn't play amazing, just played solid, I would say. Of course, being a backup and a veteran in the league for 10 years now. Saquon Barkley had his first game back, had 93 rushing yards, was able to make some explosive plays when he could. Yeah, nothing too crazy about this game. The Bills won the game. I'm sure most of us expected them to blow the brakes out of the Giants, which they didn't, but at the end of the day, they still won, so that's what counts. Wrapping up NFL Week 6 was a matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the Los Angeles Chargers. The Cowboys were able to edge out the Chargers, winning 20-17. Definitely a bounce back game for the Cowboys. Not the highest scoring game, but a good win for them. The defense definitely held things down. And Dak Prescott played a really good game after throwing 3 interceptions the week before. Didn't have any turnovers. Threw for 272 passing yards and a touchdown. Also had a rushing touchdown. Had 40 yards rushing, in fact. So Dak, he definitely had one of his more impressive performances this season. The Dallas Cowboys in this game were also able to utilize CeeDee Lamb correctly after not giving him as many targets as he should warrant. In this game, he had 7 receptions for 117 receiving yards. And then he also had Brandon Cooks more involved. He had 36 receiving yards and a touchdown. So that's a positive point for the Dallas Cowboys offense. And the defense played well. Were able to force a turnover at the end of the game. Micah Parsons, a huge sack at the end of the game as well. So the Cowboys had a good win going into the bye week. And then for the Chargers, they did play solid, but Justin Herbert, he had a lot of throws that he missed. Honestly, there could have been a lot of big plays that the Chargers could have made, but just a lot of issues for them. And the road doesn't get easier for them. They're now 3rd in the AFC West behind the Raiders, of course the Chiefs. So the Chargers Chargers, they got to start winning soon. It's crazy that we're already almost in week 7, guys. We're starting to get around that time to where we know how good teams are going to be, what some things are going to look like. And of course, there's going to be teams with these late postseason runs like the Jaguars had last year that'll potentially make the playoffs. We're getting a good picture of who the contenders are, who the pretenders are, and teams that are just going to tank. Let me know what y'all guys think about the season so far. Definitely excited because we're in a beautiful time to where the NBA is about to start as well, coinciding with the NFL season. So it's just a beautiful time in general. But anyways, guys, I appreciate y'all watching always. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss, and also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for cooking videos, shorts, and things of that nature. Hope you are doing well, being blessed. Y'all have a good one, and I appreciate y'all always.